The setting of this video is Vancouver Island on the west coast of British Columbia, Canada. More specifically, it's the area near Port Alberni, shown in the red mark. The Esquimalt and Nanaimo Railway has two subdivisions shown in this map. Snaking up the coast is part of the Victoria subdivision, which runs from Victoria up to Courtenay. But my hike is on the Port Alberni subdivision, and that's what snakes between Parksville on the right and Port Alberni on the left. Two different hikes are covered in this video, shown in the two red segments. Canadian Pacific Railway purchased the Esquimalt and Nanaimo Railway from the Dunsmuir family in 1905, and in 1911 the Port Alberni subdivision was completed. By the late 1990s, this railway subdivision was down to one freight customer, the big mill in Port Alberni, and the last shipment from that mill was in late 2001. And then in early 2002 was the last train movement on this subdivision, which brought the mill switcher out of Port Alberni. This doesn't include the Alberni Pacific Tourism Train, which is a whole separate thing, and it ran in summer 2024, and hey, I've got videos on that. The subject of this video is trains running the length of the subdivision and not just within Port Alberni. So, at the time of my hike, it's been 22 and a half years since a train last ran on this subdivision. The line is still held and owned as a railway. That's why the rails are there along with most of the signage. And the most recent official event on this subdivision was in June 2016 when a Narcoa speeder group came through. When this subdivision was operating, maintenance was tough because nature was constantly pushing back with rock slides, lots of windfall trees, etc. That's what happens when you have a railway on a steep mountain slope in a rainforest. And during these 22 years without trains operating, nature continues to push back, and sometimes people push back against nature, both in an authorized way when there have been various groups that have done work clearing slides and controlling vegetation, and also in a more casual way where people that use the corridor recreationally probably pack a chainsaw on an ATV and clear the path. During the 22 years of train inactivity, I think that a lot of people have gotten accustomed to this being an informal recreation trail that just happens to have rails on it. Whether that's right or wrong doesn't change the fact that people are using this corridor. But there was official work done in 2021 and 2022 as part of a project that installed a fiber-optic cable beside the railway along 8 miles of it. That area is from the west end of Cameron Lake to Lacey Lake Road. The result was that for a moment in time, that 8 miles of railway was passable again. Trees were cleared, both trees that were windfalls as well as the growth of trees beside the track. A lot of the foliage was removed, and it looked like a real railway with real sight lines once again. But we've now had 3 summers of growth since that project was completed. And after last summer, I noted that in a lot of places, the foliage was coming back. Well, this time when I went back, I noted that a lot of that foliage was now knee height and was becoming a problem for my walking. I know, it's not all about me. But I noted that most of this recent foliage growth was on the east side of the Alberni Summit, not much on the west side. As for me, I'm interested in railway history, and I enjoy the hobby of making photographs and videos to show that history. I found this area of the subdivision interesting, and I started visiting it in 2019, And between 2019 and 2023, I visited a lot and made 112 videos and lots of photographs, mainly of the area between Cameron Lake and Port Alberni. This was done in an authorized way with the permission of the railway owner, and over the years I've found that various groups on different sides of railway debates have all enjoyed my photographs and videos, and I'm thankful for that. In 2024, I found my focus shifting, and I wanted to just rediscover the interest and joy of just walking, as opposed to packing a couple cameras with me and then doing all the editing afterwards. And so I've just done that. And this video will be a simple version of what I used to do. I've taken some cell phone photos and some cell phone video, and I've tried to craft this into a slideshow style of video. So here's the area close in between Cameron Lake and Port Alberni, and I've colored in the railway in black. And part one of my hike is the east side of the summit to the west end of Cameron Lake. And then about a week later, I went from the west side of the summit to about mile 26. These two hikes are on opposite sides of the Alberni Summit, which I think is part of the spine of Vancouver Island. So here's part one of my hike on the right side of this map. White circle in the bottom is milepost 21. I started around 20.6. And the white circle in the top right is milepost 16, my turnaround. This is 4.6 miles each way. That works out to be about 14.7 kilometers return. Here's my start and end place for my hike. This is just a short walk from Highway 4, and it used to be what they called a set-on, set-off area where equipment could be moved on and off the railway. I saw this Amanita muscaria mushroom around mile 20.2. I saw lots of different mushrooms on this hike, but this was the only one of this kind. There was rockfall. There's been rockfall at this location just west of the mile 20.2 trestle for many years. Smaller rockfalls usually get moved by various people, but this one's a bit too big for people to move. Here's the mile 20.2 trestle, looking towards Mount Arrowsmith, which is hidden in the clouds. This is always the first and last trestle on my hikes in this location. I like railway mileposts. They tell me where I am, and they remind me it's still a railway. This is milepost 20, obviously. Here's the site of the Arrowsmith Water Tower, and all that's left now is the concrete foundations, and there's a lovely interpretive sign with the Leonard Frank 1911 photo. Here's mile 19. You can see the amount of foliage that's grown here, especially over the last year. There's rockfall around mile 18.9. This has been here for about a year. Again, the really big one is probably too big for various recreational people to move. It needs someone with specialized equipment. I always enjoy photographing this rock face around mile 18.85. It's beautiful and the sun catches it nicely in the morning. Here's the compound bridge at mile 18.8. In the foreground is a timber pile trestle. In the middle is a half-depth steel girder bridge. And in this foreground, there's a timber pile trestle. There was a lot of foliage between the rails, and one of the most common plants was trailing blackberry, which is the native blackberry plant in British Columbia. Really easy for me to trip on. Here's a grease station. These are usually around a mile apart, and they're a reminder of the days when this was an operating railway. The mile 18.1 trestle is in poor shape up top on the deck, and so when they did the fiber-optic cable project, they needed to lay planks on the trestle to spread the weight out when people and equipment moved across it. It's interesting to me mainly because of how poor the shape is up top. I think it's photogenic in that delicate decaying type of scene. Near milepost 18, there's a lot of foliage overgrowth, including the really bad broom, which I just hate because it carries ticks. Here's that milepost 18 with the trestle in the background. But back to the broom. Yeah, it's over knee height in this spot, growing well. But soon I'm at the mile 17.5 trestle. I really love this scene. It's so pretty. With the curved timber frame trestle, I love this place. We have a view of the west end of the lake here around mile 16.7. I like to linger at this spot. And a little ways further down, here's where a hiking trail comes up from the cabin road below. Hikers use the railway for a short bit on their way up to Mount Wesley. Here's a broken rail scene, and this happened a couple of years ago. What I think happened was that a windfall tree sped down the slope at a high rate of speed and crashed into the rail, breaking it, and that was enough to stop its momentum. Here's what I call my low-light Mike tree, which was cleared and adorned by some good recreational users of this corridor. And here's my turnaround. This is milepost 16 above the west end of Cameron Lake. The post used to have a 16 on it, but that got removed, so it's just an empty post and a favorite spot of mine. So here's part 2 of my hikes, and this one happened about a week after part 1, and it's on the left side of this map. And I've just realized that the blue line, which I intended just to signify the backbone mountain ranges of Vancouver Island, kind of looks like a body of water. And that's obviously not what I intended, and it's not reality. It's mountains. My start and end point is the white circle in the middle of the map. That's a Loon Lake Forest Service Road, just near the new campground. And my turnaround point is mile 26, the white circle near the top middle of the map, roughly above the Cherry Creek neighborhood. This is 3.8 miles each way, and that works out to be about 12 kilometers return. The two different sides of a summit often have slightly different looks to them, both for the types of plants, just the topography, and probably the climate zone if you want to be technical. And it definitely does feel different here on the west side of the Alberni Summit. Here I am looking back towards the morning light. This is around mile 22.5, and below me on the left is Highway 4 going downhill into Port Alberni. And soon I'm at milepost 23. I like this scene with the hanging lichen on the right-hand side, the moss on the rocks, and of course the Alberni fog adds to the atmosphere. I love these scenes, especially when there's rock cliffs on either side. Looking back again towards the morning light, here's a black and white view of things. Again, I love the morning scenes around this area. And soon I'm in a tree tunnel of maple leaves. Oh, this is so lovely in the autumn. And I can't stop saying how lovely the Alberni fog is. Around mile 23.9, I look down the slope beside the rail, and this just shows, maybe the photo doesn't do it justice, the steepness of the slope. But this is a gully that used to be crossed by a trestle, and now, ever since 1971, the route has hugged the side of the slope. And here's milepost 24, surrounded and partially obscured by a bunch of lovely maple leaves. The difference between maple leaves and maple leafs is that maple leafs fall in Game 7 to the Boston Bruins, whereas maple leaves stay on the tree until they're knocked down by some autumn winds. This rock face is one of the favorite sites on this hike for me, and I'll show you a photograph from a few years ago, which is one of my favorites. Now looking back again, here's a spot where the post-1971 route obviously curves off to the left, and the 1911 to 1971 original route would have gone straight through and crossed a trestle across the gully. I like those kinds of places with old routes. And here I am breaking out towards Lacey Lake Road, and on the right hand side, what is now a road used to be the Stokes siding, and that siding was removed in 1970. In the foreground of this photo is a piece of wood, and it's in the location where the Stokes siding would have been, so I'm curious. Is this an old tie from the siding, or is this just another piece of random wood that just happens to be there? After I cross Lacey Lake Road, I come to this crossing, which is a popular hiking trail coming up from Coombs Country Candy, going up to the Alberni Lookout. But I'm going to continue straight on the railway, heading towards the mile 25 Trestle. Here's an interesting place where there's a landslide a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago or 4. Hasn't gotten worse. That's looking down. Not quite undermined the rail bed, but it's really close to it. This is just below the Alberni Lookout hiking destination, about mile 24.9 or so. There's a better look. Culvert fell out. I'm not sure what caused it because there's not a lot of water or flood damage up here, but maybe water backed up through the culvert and it gave way on this side, or who knows. But there's also not logging right here down below or any new roads or something immediately here. So who knows what caused it, but again, it hasn't gotten noticeably worse other than creeping a bit closer. But every time I walk through here, I'm always happy to see that the railway grade still exists and hasn't fallen down. Onward to the trestle just up ahead. Rock cliff on one side and steep drop off on the other side. Much of the Port Alberni subdivision is like this. I love walking down these tree tunnels of old railway, especially when I come up to a trestle, and even more especially on a foggy morning. I sure love this. This is roughly below the Alberni Lookout hiking destination. I call this mile 25 on the railway. I've gone vertical here to show you more of the deck so that you can see what it's really like. Soft and crumbly ties. So I'm walking above the thick stringer beams. There's hikers in the area with dogs barking. I always take note of the fire barrel platforms. There are 5 of them on this trestle still. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I'm always expecting another one to fall down as they're old. This is the one that I keep waiting to fall. So it's already on its way. I'll show you. Yeah, it's got a lean and a bend. And I continue to walk my way towards milepost 25, the end of the trestle. I love this foggy scene. I often feel philosophical and spiritual in these moments. It's a good thing to know what you love to do and then to do it. I think that's good for the soul. Certainly it's what I'm feeling this morning on this foggy hike on an old railway above Port Alberni. Specifically, I'm on the mile 25 trestle. It last saw a train in early 2002. I'm having fun. After crossing the trestle, it was time to climb up on the rocks above the west end, do a few photos in the fog, and then time to continue my hike westward for another mile. Here's a small arbutus tree making its life in the fog zone above Port Alberni. And soon I'm at one of my favorite scenes. I love the big rock in the left background. This is a rock cut area, so it's naturally crowded in, but even more so with all of the overgrowth beside the track. And here's one of my favorite photos from this location. This is from February 2022. And now it's time for some more walking and talking. I love a tree tunnel. That's what I call this. The growth encroaching from either side, joining above. I just don't like it when I catch some spider webs in my teeth. It's early October. We have some maple leaves with lovely colors. Stuck under some ocean spray. Nice. Mile 26 is the turnaround point on my hike, and it's often the turnaround on a hike from the opposite direction. This is the end of the video. Thanks very much for watching this.